Hello, and welcome to our Ethical Behavior Analysis in the Age of AI webinar. I'm Amy Cook, BCBA and Community Manager, and I want to go over a few things before we get started. First, you will all be eligible to earn one free CEU if you're watching this live and you complete a few requirements. We will share 3 keywords throughout the webinar that you need to jot down. After the webinar, I'm going to share an online form for you to complete where you will type in those 3 keywords for your participation. And a recording will be sent out to all registrants. However, only live participants are eligible to earn the CEU. Before I hand it over to our wonderful guest speakers, let me tell you a little bit more about us. Hirasmus is a mission-driven platform built to empower the people who care for children with autism. Inspired by a father's journey navigating early intervention for his son, Rasmus, we exist to ease the burden on care teams and help more children thrive. At our core is a data system designed for real world of behavioral health, where clinicians and caregivers can capture progress, document sessions, stay focused on the child, not the paperwork. Every feature is guided by experienced BCBAs and supported by a team that partners with providers from the very first demo through implementation and beyond. Trusted by behavioral health providers, school-based teams, and organizations nationwide, Hirasmus adapts to fit your needs, whether you're a solo practitioner or a national enterprise organization, so that you can deliver exceptional care at scale. We're on a mission to improve the lives of 1 million children with autism by empowering the professionals, caregivers, and educators, and all of you that are here with us today. The first keyword alert, is safe. I will also type that word in the chat in just a minute, but write down the first keyword is safe. And I'm now going to hand it over to Ryan O'Donnell and Dr. David Cox to get us started. Thank you so much for both of you for being here today. And I'd love for you just to start by sharing a little bit about your unique backgrounds with us.
You want to kick us off?
Sure. All right. Welcome, everybody. Super excited to talk about this. One of my favorite things to do is just like nerd out with other folks interested in the same topic. So this is very much like a highlight of my day. So I just wanted to say thank you as well for the opportunity for everybody at Hirasmus. So essentially, I like to talk about my behavior analytic career as kind of like 3 phases. The first one was I just accidentally stumbled into it accidentally at the University of Nevada, Reno. Turns out it was really a bit of a mecca for behavior analysis, still is. Things like acceptance and commitment therapy and such, RFT, a lot of that was kind of born in that area. There's also a lot of philosophical work, which I promise not to bore people too much with here, but it's relevant and I think super important. So explored that, realized, hey, get a master's if you want to kind of apply yourself and work in this space and make a living and such. So I spent my time at the Florida Institute of Technology in their brick and mortar program in Orlando, Florida. And the goal there was just to get as much practice as I possibly could when it comes to hands-on work. And I also spent some time in a EAB lab working with, we had pigeons as well as fish. We taught fish how to do really cool tricks. A lot of basic schedule work there. And then since then, it's been kind of this like slow jumping around to different roles until I just accidentally picked up a camera one day and found that really interesting. And I was also very naively thought that I could record something. It'd be very interesting if I just posted online, which is, there's a lot of nuance that goes into that. And so I've been exploring videography, filmmaking, and I really think that that's of interest to me as a behavior analyst, because you're trying to ultimately influence somebody without ever hearing or seeing them. So it's a very fun challenge at the end of the day to make something like that. So for the sake of today in this project, I try to, as much as I can, partner up and make friends with people like Dr. Cox, to where I can learn what's going on, spend some time in that space, but also collaborate to kind of create content. And so we've been working on a newsletter and a course related to AI literacy for behavior analysts. So that's me. And go ahead. You're up.
Nice. I don't think I appreciated that. I guess I always thought you were interested in like filming and stuff. I didn't realize it was like a random kind of happenstance thing. So yeah, learned something about you. That's cool. Hey everybody, David Cox. I got started in behavior analysis during my undergrad. was pre-med working in retail, trying to find any kind of job that would look good on the resume in order to apply to med schools. As you can imagine, if you don't even have a bachelor's in psychology yet, hard to get any kind of job. But there was this one company looking for autism habilitators was the title, what we would call today an RBT, just didn't know it at the time. Signed up my first session working with this kid, kind of turned my back to record some data, and they jumped on my back and bit me like right between my shoulder blades and then kind of dropped. And I was like, what is this? I'm hooked. This is incredible. So worked clinically, RBT, then got my BCBA. Did that for about 8, 10 years. At that time, I was actually still interested in going to med school, but I was playing around with studying for the MCAT, like the physics portion, was playing around with some equations, trying to relate momentum in physics to like some behavioral stuff. It was what I was doing was garbage, but a BCBA walked by and I explained it, and they're like, "Oh, have you heard of behavioral momentum? You know, Tony Nevin." And I was like, "Wait, what is this?" So that's how I found Society for the Quantitative Analyses of Behavior, which is a lot of work in choice, judgment, decision making. So after working clinically for about 10 years, I went back to grad school, University of Florida, to get my PhD in behavior analysis. Focused on a lot of basic work there, discounting, matching, a lot of human operant stuff, always with that kind of translational lens towards clinical decision making, clinical choice. And it was during that time that these articles started to pop up about how AI was better than doctors at just about everything. And so here I was, studying clinical decision making. How can we make better choices from like a healthcare clinical perspective? And I saw this tool that was being used to do better than humans. It's like, what is this kind of a thing? Fortunately, as I think we'll get into a little bit today, if you understand how modeling works in behavior analysis, you understand how modeling works in AI. It's just more variables, more complex equations, and you kind of scale up. So it was easy to start studying what is AI, how do you build these things, how do you code up these systems, how does data fit into it, and all that kind of fun stuff when I started that journey. So for the last 11 years, been trying to play at the intersection of artificial intelligence, clinical decision making, behavior analysis. Did a postdoc in behavioral pharmacology at Johns Hopkins University in the behavioral pharmacology research unit. Another postdoc in data science to figure out how to actually do this stuff in industry, because turns out in academia you're still missing some skills if you want to do this stuff at scale. Yeah, and then the last 5, 6 years, been collaborating with a variety of different companies, Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, Rethink First, currently Mosaic Pediatric Therapy, the VP of Data Science. And then I also have a doc lab and teach at the Endicott College and the Institute of Applied Behavioral Science, their PhD program. I think that's everything in 3 minutes or less.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So we set up today to be a back and forth conversation. At any point, anyone wants to throw any questions at us in the chat box or in the Q&A, whatever you prefer, we'll keep our eyes on that and integrate them in as we talk, or we'll make sure that we hit them at the end of the session, depending on where we're kind of at. So that's the structure. No slides.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. I'm really excited for this. And I have a question, I guess maybe to kick us off here. So, you've spent years translating complex behavioral ideas into film and story. And so when you think about or you look at AI literacy through that same lens, I'm curious what parallels you might see between kind of teaching the science of behavior and teaching about the behavior of machines, if you will.
Yeah. So, I think with anything, when I first become interested in it, it's like I'm not sure why, and it becomes more clear as I start to progress. It's that old, I've like almost tried to always live, at least my professional career, off of that line of Skinner's of like when you find something interesting, drop everything and study it. And so that was behavior analysis itself, cameras and jumping into filmmaking. And now like each of the subjects where I try to go into, that's also consistent there too. And I think with both domains, filmmaking, editing video, as well as AI, what you're trying to do is just kind of replace the mystique with context. So you're trying to help people see the contingencies that actually produce the output, whether it's a learner's behavior or a model's prediction here. And so I don't have the expertise on this project that we work on to be able to talk about the exact math right there, but it's constantly trying to figure out how do we communicate and distill information that isn't oversimplifying it, but that's making it palatable to be able to read and understand. Like one of our themes is always like, you don't have to understand the math. But you have to be a mathematician, but you need to understand some basics of how these components work, right? So
Yeah.
film taught me that meaning is built through sequences and contexts. It's not isolated frames. So each frame at
Yeah.
30 frames per second is its own thing. And I almost think of those like an individual contingency, right? In behavior analysis. But
I see.
really
Yeah.
the story and the bigger picture is like watching everything. And anyone who's watched any film that you're interested in, if they do it somewhat well, things that are happening at the beginning, middle, and end will totally transform with just like the slightest little change in story structure, a change in a plot twist or something like that at some point.
Mhm.
Another parallel is like the cultural level. So you're shaping, I think, a verbal community, or you're like um, trying to create something that fits for a verbal community is another way to think about it. And so really there's like a lot of different parallels, but it's really just teaching uh it's recognizing that there's a verbal community, that you're shaping something, and that thing that you put out there has much larger impacts than just the singular frame or the singular output that an AI puts out.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And it's interesting, and you referenced this, I think, in when you're kind of talking about your intro, but then you brought it up again here. This idea of how can you like teach and reach individuals of varying backgrounds and skill sets, and without contacting them. And so I'm curious how you think of, and I know that's been something that I struggled a little bit with this project and others, even like when you're writing a journal article.
Yeah.
Um, but how do you think about, and maybe it's this shapes over time. Um, Setting up the content in a way that is that ideal level of detail and sophistication for the reader's audience that again you've never like chatted with them.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I think there's a few blends here. It's ideally, if I could wave a wand, what you're going to do is you're going to test and iterate these things. So if I could
Mhm.
steal an example that I've seen in the industry, you'll create something, put it together, put it in front of an audience, maybe singular person. Like the example I've seen is they'll literally have somebody come into a room with a two-way mirror, and they'll sit down at
Yeah.
a desk with a singular computer device, and they'll press play, and they'll just do what they call a laugh graph on these, and they'll just see from 0 to 5, like how much people are laughing at their advertisement that they're making. And then they'll
Mhm.
stack that data and they'll be like, oh, it seems to be that around, the 35-second mark, we're having an issue here. And then they'd rework their
Mhm.
video. So for me, it's funny that people do those sort of things, and they're just simple mimics of kind of the procedures that we do at the end of the day as behavior
Yeah.
analysts, right? But the point is like you're finding a way to collect data on the specific audience that you're trying to ultimately influence, right?
Mhm.
And see what that's like. There's situations where you can kind of like step back and do similar things. So anytime I possibly can for videography, it's showing it to the target audience, getting their feedback, and
Yeah.
really selecting those people for the end audience. So with films, that's usually like bringing in people that are RBTs, BCABAs, BCBAs, PhD level or academic, researchers or whatnot, and just been like, hey,
Mhm.
is this accurate? Is this on track? At the end of the
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
And then a layer below that, and these are getting like less and less close to the actual source of the data, is really just looking at simple things, click through rates on the newsletters, looking
Oh,
at
sure. Yeah.
total time finishing throughout the videos. Those are the feedback mechanisms there. Does that
Oh,
make
I love
sense?
it. It does. Yeah. And it's interesting. There's a lot of parallels with that as you were explaining it. Um, to as like a data scientist or an AI engineer, ML engineer, with what are considered like best practices for ethically building these tools as well. So like one, for example, I love like how you're talking about like a film is like individual snapshots, and it's not just about any individual frame. Right? It's like the trajectory that is the storyline that feeds
Yeah.
itself, right? So you have this temporal analysis, if you will. Um, Same idea, I think, if we start talking about like if I'm building a model or an AI tool for behavior analysis, we know that behavior is something that unfolds over time, these kind of reinforcement processes and whatnot. So if your model isn't adequately capturing that trajectory, like as a domain expert, as a clinician, if someone's presenting a model that's a static snapshot, I'm immediately going to be a little skeptical, right? Well, how are you capturing this thing? We know behavior changes over time. Like, how are you capturing? It's called time series analytics. And then the other interesting piece there that you brought up is the like domain expert, if you will, right? You go and you get the BCBA and the RBT. And similarly, I've seen a number of companies that are advertising products, and you look at their team or how they talk about how they built it, and they're like, they're bragging on social media. I stood this up in a day with ChatGPT Copilot or whatever, and you're like, oh man, incredibly nervous about that. But I think there's some companies doing it well that are again getting that BCBA RBT. Like, wait, what is your pain point? What data do you use for this decision? How can I automate it? This output, is it accurate? And it helps to know people are bringing in people in the same kind of way.
So continuing on here a little bit, you mentioned some of these themes, and I brought them up earlier. Like AI is math at the end of the day, and
Yeah.
what's going on that layer. I feel like one thing that prevented me from stepping into this arena and just reading stuff in general, not even like trying to actually learn exactly how it works, but just I was nervous to step into the
Yeah.
first place, was just that it seems to be riddled with math. One thing that you helped me
Yeah.
with was like, hey, there's math, but also like you don't have to become a mathematician.
Mhm.
Um, so for the average practitioner, what's needed on mathematical literacy to be able to like
Yeah.
ethically evaluate these tools?
Sure. So I think if you understand as a practitioner or anybody, I guess, if it's any kind of AI tool, if you understand that when we reference math or like an AI model, it just means like a function, right? Y equals mx plus b, right? That's the function for a line, right? M is your slope, y is just your y-intercept, or x is your y-intercept, or b, I think of that equation, mx plus b. Um, Matching law, right? Ratio of behavior equals ratio of reinforcement. And so when you start talking about it in those ways, it's easy for behavior analysts to recognize we already think functionally. That is, we assume that behavior equals, right, is determined by equals current environmental contingencies plus that organism's learning history. So we're already kind of used to thinking in this functional way, if you will, this mathematical way. And I think as soon as you kind of reframe it like that, and then you realize that all AI models are an output equals some kind of set of input data variables that are structured in a particular way mathematically, um, that's probably all that you need to know. But also kind of recognize that as soon as I do that, as soon as I recognize that all these models are just the output of some set of variables going into a mathematical structure, you already kind of know what questions that you would want to start asking a vendor, right? Wait, what actually is the behavior that you built this model around to predict? For example, if you built ChatGPT or some kind of large language model on predicting the next word in, I don't know, blog posts about pets, but I'm repurposing it to write BCBA treatment plans, that's a concern, right? So again, what is the actual output that this model was built to predict? And then similarly, what kind of variables did you actually include in that model? Why those variables? What were the kind of ranges or the clients that were used to inform the data that went into building this model? How representative are those clients of my clients? Going back to like there's structures of equations, even if I don't know what or if I should rephrase that, if I don't feel mathematically savvy enough to challenge like how they built their model, um, all models are still based on assumptions, right? Matching law, behavior equals the ratio of reinforcement. That's an assumption that we can test. You can then ask, what assumptions did you actually make when you chose this model? Why did you make those? Why did you leave out these variables, include these others, and so on and so forth? So kind of again going back to like the main point of modeling and function building and basic literacy there. I think if behavior analysts know very simply or at the most basic level that any math or any AI model really is just output equals some set of inputs, you can start asking questions. And then one thing that's unique, I think, slightly is that with mathematical models, we're much more precise in our predictions than perhaps we're used to in behavior analysis. But that also is another really interesting point of curiosity and questioning, right? How do you know that accuracy of precision is in fact correct for the task at hand?
One of my favorite little lines that we picked up that you shared with me on the diving into this was like AI is math, not magic.
Yeah. Yes. Oh,
um,
exactly. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
every point in my career, it's been like something seems magical, but when you open up the hood, you're just like, oh, there's
Yeah. Yeah.
variables at play here and that's behavior analysis, that's filmmaking, that's AI as well.
Oh, yeah.
Um, Yeah.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. And it's interesting kind of hearing you say that too. I know we often talk about behavior analysis, how it's sometimes tricky, even when we talk about what we do with people in broader society, because as soon as the controlling contingencies become overt or explicit, people freak out a little bit, right? But as soon as, if they don't know, we have free will, that things feel magical. It's fantastic. Same with
Yeah.
AI. And I think a lot of tech companies, a lot of the hype cycle around some of this stuff is geared to make you feel like it's magic, right? But as soon as you appreciate that it's math, then you can start asking all these fun questions, which is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice.
So going into this math a little bit, digging into your research over the spring and summer, a
Yeah,
consistent theme was looking at you're describing, you and your co-authors, about how there is mathematical bias that will always
yeah,
be occurring, that are embedded
hmm,
into models. Like you just can't get out of that. Um,
yeah,
and so from that behavior analytic perspective, how do we operationalize bias testing the
yeah.
same way that is it similar to how we do, procedural integrity and such?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of similar parallels. And so like the basic idea, kind of going back to the idea that all of this is a mathematical function and driven by the data that I have available to train the model. Um, as soon as you say that, you realize that the data that I have isn't going to perfectly match the data that you have, right? So if I build a model, therefore that model is going to be biased toward the data that I have, right? It's not going to automatically generalize because it's not perfectly identical. And again, impossible to escape. Um, but what you can kind of think about is like, in the same way, procedural integrity, maybe IOA, I don't know. Procedural integrity is, I think, a good parallel. I have this list of things that kind of need to get done in order to understand, is the service being delivered as we would expect it? And I can trust the data perhaps on the back end. Um, you can talk about, when I'm building a model, the steps that went into creating the model, the data sets, the use cases, how you can test the model predictions on different types of demographics and whatnot. And then again, based on all of that information, these often go into sometimes what's referred to as a model card. It allows you to look at, on the whole, this model and its output, can I trust what it's doing given my current use case, right? So procedural integrity, I'm going to go and I'm going to see what somebody's doing. Based on the results of that, I can then see, do I trust this point of data? What needs to change in order for me to trust it? Same kind of idea with like model cards and bias testing with AI systems. There should be a suite of information that developers can give you to show this is what we can currently do. And then you as a consumer can look and say, I trust that it's good to go, or this is what would need to happen. This is what would need to change in order for me to generalize or kind of bring that into my use case.
My understanding is that we're on a trajectory of lots of very unique tools for unique situations. And so
Oh, absolutely.
just being careful of like, it's not, everything's not a nail and you got a hammer. But like
Oh,
where
for
we're heading
sure.
is there's going to be a lot of specific tools, right?
Yeah. No, and I love that you brought that up because I think there's it. Most people's introduction to AI was large language models, probably ChatGPT 2022 or whatever. And now there's like the big four or five or whatever. And I think a lot of individuals know those exist, and it's the easy button to go to that website and ask it for everything that you want to do. But in the same kind of in that same vein, because the way these models are built and they're trained on so much information, it's hard for them to be really specialized at one task. And so there are smaller models, not language models, that exist that actually do things better, more performant, cheaper to run, less impact on the environment, all that kind of fun stuff. And it seems like in the last, I don't know, 3, 4, 6 months, the larger world has been talking about that more. Small models are the future, right? Specific models are the future, which is, music to my ears. Because again, I kind of got started playing in this domain 2015, and really until ChatGPT came out, it was all small models. We were all building very specific use case models that were really good at the thing they did. And then these kind of omnibus things came out and took over a bit. So it's nice to see pendulum swinging back a little bit. But
I was more or less the one that caught up in the ChatGPT launch and the interest
nice.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
Recognizing also that like algorithmic feeds of social media were like the at least one for me, like one of the biggest use cases of seeing these
Yeah.
things just deployed without guardrails and what that can
Oh,
do to
yeah, for
society.
sure. Yeah, and I think what really motivates me in that area is knowing that there are people using these algorithms to make money, but there's no reason that us as behavior analysts can't figure out how to use data and algorithms for good also and for our use cases. And so I think the more people in behavior analysis that gain AI literacy that can help build these tools, for us, by us, will make it, I think, better, help us out in the long run.
We had a question
Yeah.
about closed AI systems in here.
Oh,
Essentially,
sure.
like handling HIPAA, intellectual property infringement, and such. I think one of the take
Yeah.
homes that I've learned from you is there's a massive difference between opening up, say, ChatGPT, Gemini, and interacting with that, as opposed to having a closed system that's on your own servers that
Yep.
was set up by somebody that understands this stuff. Can you touch on that maybe real quick, and then we'll
Oh
jump back
yeah,
in?
absolutely. So if I'm using as like an individual user, I'm going to the ChatGPT browser, Gemini browser, so on, Perplexity browser, and I'm interacting with that. Everything that I enter into that chat can be used to train future models. And especially early on, I haven't seen as much of this in the last year or so. There were various enterprise kind of attacks, if you will, where people were using this knowledge that you're entering information and it's going to end up coming into the model and outputs later to try to do domain attacks to get secret information from companies because their employees were misusing it. All that to say, I'm a user going to these websites, um, not HIPAA compliant, not FERPA compliant. That's bad news. You don't want to enter anything there. Um, there are ways you can imagine, since this is just a mathematical model, kind of like you might create in Excel or so on and so forth. I can take that model, it's an object on your computer, and I can bring that somewhere. I can pull that down to my local computer and I can play with it. I can put it up in a cloud-based service. This is typically how it's done, but I can wall it off from the rest of the internet, except for you are the only one that can access it. And so there are ways to set up closed AI systems, which I think Chelsea's asking about there, that do make the probability that they're HIPAA and FERPA compliant higher. So it's still impossible to guarantee that there's no data that's being fed back to the systems. And I think we've seen some really interesting lawsuits recently about large tech companies just violating their terms of service around user privacy and data. So I don't know that I would fully trust it. But going back to your point about smaller models, it's becoming increasingly easier to bring models locally onto my computer or into a server that my company houses and owns. That makes it perfectly HIPAA and FERPA compliant. Impossible for that to exit. So yeah, I think that's kind of where we're at now. I don't know if Chelsea, if that was useful.
Yeah,
Um,
perfect. So, real quick, I want to pause for our second code word, which is responsible. It's almost like Ellen knew where we were going here. Um, and so, responsibility, yes. I think we'll talk about responsibility a little bit more shortly. So, if there's any comments that are in there that we haven't gotten to, I think it's just because we're going to get down that road.
nice.
So I want to move us back into a little bit of the ethical discussion and get us into contextualism a little bit here.
Oh, sure. Before
Um,
we get there, though, I have a question for you.
okay.
Yeah. So, in filmmaking, every kind of cut, if you will, changes the meaning. So, how do you think about like editing AI outputs? And what kind of government responsibility? What is the human responsibility to ensure that the product remains ethically accurate rather than just, an efficiency gain?
Yeah. Yeah. So editing AI outputs is the same as editing a documentary video. At the end of the day, you're responsible for the narrative implications of every omission, compression, or rearrangement that the model produces. And this is something I don't
Mhm.
think I really appreciated as much until I got into filmmaking and picking up cameras. And I make it a goal every year to watch like every possible documentary that shows up on major streaming services, and like dig
Oh,
into
that's cool.
archives as well. I think I'm over 120 this year, 150, something like that. And the thing is, really, is because every frame, every second, there's 30 frames on average, or
Mhm.
24. There's every second or every frame there was a decision made of like keep that going or don't keep that going, drop that, insert something else. And so when you're talking about something like the history of behavior analysis, like a topic that I tackled last year, um, uh, there's that was a beastly 3 hours, 3.5 hours. But like that's whatever 3.5 hours times the 30 frames per second is that number. Those are decision points of
Yeah.
like that are potentially going to steer people certain directions. And the biggest thing is like omitting things, right? So at the end of the day, it is purely a like the pressure is on me to try to make sure that not only am I making something interesting and useful, but that it's going to be accurate as well, which is
On
partially
A
the wrong,
webinar on my
the wrong.
phone
Oh,
right
Amanda,
now,
we can
so I'm
hear
just
you.
hold please. Cool. So essentially, I think these models are set up for efficiency and they're like made, and I'm talking about like the general chat GPTs and stuff right now. Like they're made to make us feel good, to feel like we're getting the answers that we're looking for.
Yeah.
And that sort of efficiency and like it's programmed essentially to tell me what I need to know. And with filmmaking, I realized that like anything that is output, anything that is put in front of somebody, especially to like potentially influence them in some sort of way, has a heck of a lot of intentionality behind it that you should be aware of. And if they're not aware of it, then I guess that's doubly scary because both parties don't understand what's going on there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's really just human oversight exists because these models or are like not taking into account. Maybe they don't. They're flattening the nuance, I think is what it is. And there's like
Mhm.
nuance in every topic. And
Yeah.
analysts, we have to make sure that we're restoring that nuance, whether that's the
Mhm.
filmmaking stuff that I'm doing, you working with a client and making sure that the nuance isn't being missed when you're creating your goals or analyzing a
Yeah.
graph or considering a certain intervention. And the same thing on these models is there's going to be nuance that was not considered. And so I feel like I'm constantly trying to think and like fight, like, how do I have more variability in thinking and
Yeah.
more out there? Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think a really interesting example of this came out this last week. There was a code leak with OpenAI that highlighted how in the coming months, it's unclear if it's been rolled out yet. I don't think it has. But there's going to be kind of like you see when a Google search, right? And there's the ad wars on the side, right? There's a bazaar. People pay to get an ad listed. In OpenAI, there was a batch of code that was leaked showing that they're going to be doing the same thing. So the outputs that you're getting from Chat GPT, at least in the future, unknown when it'll happen, will have content again paid for by somebody, the highest bidder. Which going back to like this idea of absence of nuance, and now it's like also purposeful insertion of paid for ideas. It's fascinating to think about.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I'm surprised it
yeah,
took them that long to get the ad model inserted in the first place.
yeah, I know.
That seems to be
Yeah.
how the internet works.
Oh, absolutely. And I did do the math, 22.68 million frames in that 2.5 hour or 3.5 hour
Three and
video.
a half hours. That's wild.
That's the total number of decision points you had to make.
Yeah, yeah. And if
Um,
we're being clear here and talking about honesty, like not every single frame was thought with that level of intention and care, for every
yeah,
single one.
yeah.
Like
Oh, for
there
sure.
was a little bit of it here and there, and I tried to be very
Yeah,
nuanced, but like there was not that many decision points actively made along each one.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So
But that was the choice base. That's incredible.
it scales
Um,
fast.
I also have a quick question for you. With the total number of documentaries that you've watched this year, what's your favorite? What's the most interesting thing you've learned?
Oh, the most interesting. The I'm really enjoying. Let me pull up my list, make sure I don't miss something here.
Oh, sure.
One of my favorites, and a consistent genre is anything that's
Mhm.
looking at music and like the story
Oh,
of a
interesting.
musician.
Yeah.
And so I feel like one that was very fun, that was a couple years old that I just got into, I think, was Billie Eilish's "The World Is a Little Blurry."
Oh, okay.
Um,
I haven't seen that
and
one.
the purpose is there is so much nuance that goes into an album being created like that,
Hmm.
but also uh, the what you see of a celebrity in like quick snapshots is nothing compared to the day-to-day life. So being able to
Yeah.
see the day-to-day life of a rising star like that, and how their families handling it is pretty wild. So yeah, there's I can give some more recommendations later about things that are maybe a little bit more topical here, but I
Yeah.
want something that's also like I think uplifting and makes you feel good.
Yeah. Well, and I think what I also love about that answer is it gets back to the nuance and complexity of everyday life. And through that experience, that's what can help make us an expert in our craft. So kicking that back, like some of these models that don't have that, right? Or each of the BCBA on this call, they do have that. And so again, what's lost as you start leaning into some of these technologies? So it ties in. I think it ties in perfectly.
Yeah,
Um,
cool.
Speaking of contextualism, so Project Chiron is grounded in contextualism. That's our newsletter, Project Chiron, for those that may not know. Um, how, when you think about this project, how do you help practitioners, especially early career analysts, really grasp that worldview when they are handed some kind of deterministic-esque black box AI tool?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I have roots at the University of Nevada, Reno, and there was some philosophical stuff to kind of mention here. I'm going to try to do this quick, and I think I can pull this off, but it's super important. And I never really realized this until years into practice and people kind of hammering it with me over and over again. And so there's different, I'm going to preface this with there's different ways to look at the world. I'm going to cherry pick four that were talked about historically by people out of the behavior analytic community. And so there was this book in, I believe, 1942, published by Pepper, that was called World Hypotheses. And think about this as the lenses that you're putting on to view the world. So right now I have glasses that help me see 20/20. If I take them off, I can still read things. I got to squint, and it's a little bit different. If I go out and I put on a helmet for welding, like I can now look at things that are super bright, right? So the same things get seen in different ways when you put these lenses on. And so the first, and I'll lead into contextualism here, but we're going to talk about three others first. The first was formism. And the idea is that the world is understood by grouping things based on similarity, like classifying behaviors by shared features. And so something's true, or we believe it as a science when it corresponds to the right category. So the idea there is the scientist is just making a bunch of categories. And if it matches the category, cool. All right. The next one's mechanism. The world's like a machine made of parts that cause predictable effects. So truth is the correspondence between your model and what happens, similar to checking whether your behavior plan predicts for the right outcomes. This one is very much people will fall into this one in behavior analysis a lot because it seems to be I think just like a default easy one to fall into. It's like if I find the right antecedent variable, I can solve this whole problem, right? I just need to
Yeah.
find what that trigger is. And what that does is it gets you just kind of like looking for individual pieces amongst everything. And then organicism, the world develops like a growing organism. So each part's making sense only in relation to the larger developmental sequence. Truth is judged by coherence, how well everything fits together into a unified explanatory whole. And so I've always looked at like developmental curriculums and stuff like this are really, really approaching things from this way. So our VB maps and stuff, I'm not saying that those are from that worldview, but I think it's a close way to kind of relate to these things where it's like what we're trying to do is figure out this overall arching sequence at the end of the day. But contextualism is the act in context. And we hear this when we're going through graduate training programs, but really what's going on is it's always changing and defined by its situation. So like seeing behavior as a function of its environment. So truth will be successful working. So an idea is only true if it helps us accomplish our goals effectively of prediction, influence, ethical action. So it's really important that behavior analysis operates from the same assumptions as contextualism. Events are understood through their relations, and analyses are judged by how well they work in practice. What we're getting at here essentially is that the same applies to AI outputs. No prediction is the truth. It's a behavior of the model under certain conditions. But what we'll fall into oftentimes is we'll be like, oh, if we'll fall into those other camps where it's just like, we believe that if it's lining up correctly to other things that we've looked at, then it's got to be true. But it's like, no, we need to step back, realize that this is just like one of the variables in the larger context. If we're going to allow AI to insert itself into our analyses of a behavioral event. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The other thing I like about that, and what's always fun for me to think about. One of my favorite quotes is from Bertrand Russell, and it said, "I would never die for my beliefs because I might be wrong." And so I love this idea of like the model, behavior in context of its training data set and input or whatever. And so, like to your point, it may be difficult to understand ground truth. So if something doesn't quite line up, or maybe I'll rephrase that, even though it does line up, both me and the model could be wrong, right? Or similarly, a model might give me some kind of output that's contradictory to my learning experience. Just because it's contradictory doesn't mean that it's automatically wrong either. What I love about this idea of contextualism is it forces us to say, well, wait a second, what are the contexts and conditions that led to this output? what is my learning history, the context and conditions that are leading me to make this claim, and how can I square those two things and figure out how to blend them together or understand, which might be more right, more wrong, who knows?
Yeah,
Yeah, it just
and
makes a lot of sense. I love it.
I think it's a simple way to show that like if you're trying to just find coherence and find simplicity in things, that it can be very quickly lead you down a scary path, right?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. For sure.
So yeah, the goal here is just really as analysts, we're gonna see each client data set or model as an act in context rather than a formula to be applied. So just kind of being
Yeah.
careful not to get in those kind of formulaic kind of approaches. All
Nice.
right, so shifting a little bit, you've argued that contingencies, not just education, are required for ethical AI use. So what contingencies could organizations put in place right now to reinforce responsible AI behavior?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's kind of two that I think of when this kind of topic pops up. Uh, the first is that AI is still so new as a tool generally, and everyone's trying to figure out how to use it, the best times to use it, where it's wrong, all that kind of fun stuff. It doesn't help that the models update every day, seemingly, so things change on us. So one thing I think that leadership or organizations can do, I guess anywhere really in the org structure, is try to create that culture of transparency and communication around how are you using AI today? What are the tasks that you feel you need to use it for to, I don't know, speed things up, do things better, whatever. Where do you find AI is helpful? Where do you find that it's causing harm or not performing as well? And I think kind of creating again that kind of culture of transparency, communication, experimentation allows everybody to start to learn from each other more quickly than us kind of being siloed or trying to hide it from everybody. So I think that's one thing that people can do is kind of create those contingencies so we can all learn from each other more quickly to then figure out the best ways to use it at our company. Um, the second thing that I think is even more critical or gives me more concern if it's not implemented well, perhaps, is that a lot of the AI tools that I've seen on the market are hyped around this idea of efficiency improvers. All right. It used to take you 4 hours to write a treatment report. With our tool, you can do it in an hour, 30 minutes, or whatever. What's interesting there is that a lot of and you can look through the history of healthcare and medicine. That's primarily the lens that I've explored in the past, where there have been efficiency gains added under the promise of it gives you back as a practitioner free time in your day, right? No longer are you doing pajama time, it's sometimes referred to, right? You're no longer kind of doing your admin work when you get home. You'll be able to finish it more quickly and actually work a 9 to 5, if that makes sense. Um, what we often see, though, is even though that's how it's marketed, because of those efficiency gains, and people are already used to working this many hours a day, they then fill that time with other things. Often it might be that as someone in a leadership role, oh, I see you now have the ability to take on 5 more clients, 7 more clients, 10 more clients, or whatever. So it's easy to let these efficiency gains kind of sneak into contingencies that are already overtaxing a system that has high burnout, low quality, poor quality in some instances. So I think as a leader, as an organization, as I'm bringing these tools in, I think making sure we're leaning into creating the contingencies that they're going to help us improve quality, not quantity, not volume, not efficiency. And that immediately kind of reframes the whole thing from, use this AI report builder or whatever, not to go from 4 hours to 1 hour, but to get that first draft done in a half hour instead of 2 hours. And then you can spend the rest of the time adding back in that nuance, making it better than you could have otherwise. But again, that's a contingency that has to be set, because if that doesn't exist, if I'm going to be asked to take on more clients, even if that's how I want to use it, contingencies won't be there to kind of support me doing that.
Yeah, perfect. Beautiful. Love it. So talking about some of the training and cultural transmission a little bit more, you outlined tiered AI literacy levels from foundational to
Yeah.
strategic in a paper published this year, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. Yep.
How should graduate programs sequence those skills so students can generalize ethical reasoning across new tools?
Yeah. It's a great question. And I think,
And sorry to interrupt,
yeah,
but I was going to say, I frame this as graduate schools, but I think this is anybody that just hasn't spent time in this space and wants to develop these skills, right?
sure. Yeah. 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 No, I love that reframe too. Yeah, it's interesting. And for those that may not have seen the paper, the basic AI literacy domains are like a technical understanding of how AI works, critical evaluation, right, how to evaluate outputs, awareness of the different applications that exist so you can choose the right tool for the job, basics of data literacy. Again, data feeds these things. So understanding how data works, how it moves, how it flows through models is really important. Ethical awareness, a lot of the topics, conversations that don't necessarily pop up when we're talking about a technological system by itself. Overall social impact awareness, the ability to conduct risk assessments, and then the last one is kind of practical interaction skills. So day to day, how am I going to work with these things? Um, how to sequence that, I think, is a really interesting question, and I suspect it's probably going to turn on one, like how do graduate programs think about the function of their degree? And then relatedly, if I have all these skills that I want to work in, is it going to be kind of like ethics and supervision and some of these other topics where you're trying to embed them across every class, right? Here's how you'd use AI for assessment. Here's how you'd use AI for building skill programs or whatever. Here's how you'd use AI for this other skill or whatnot. Or are they going to create like a standalone ethics class, a standalone like AI literacy module or class or something like that? But even within that, kind of going back to the function of graduate program, I think there's also going to be a really different approach in how I go about this. If I view my main goal as helping students pass the BACB exam, right? If that's the function of my graduate program, probably not going to be a lot of this. What I'm going to do is say, good luck with this when you graduate, because you're going to need to figure out how to do this because it's currently not on the task list, right? Or the code of ethics. Um, if I view the function of the master's program as preparing students for their first job, that's going to be really interesting. I'm probably going to lean heavily into the awareness of applications, ethical awareness, societal impact, risk assessment, things like that, maybe that practical interaction skills. Because what I need to do then as an educator is stay abreast of what tools exist and how can they be used. Because again, if I'm viewing my goal is to help these people get a or perform well in their first job, then I need to be showing them how to actually use these tools. Um, Things get a little bit interesting if I view the function of a graduate program as teaching like generalizable foundational knowledge, right, or critical thinking skills. Here, we're probably going to lean more into a little bit of the technical understanding, critical evaluation, risk assessment, and things like that. Because what I'm trying to do in that instance is not necessarily teach people how to use the hammer that's available to me today, but teach them a generalizable skill set. So as these waves of tools come on the market and dynamically change over time, they'll have the foundational skill set to critically evaluate them and use them in their day-to-day practice. So again, I think all of those are probably relevant, whether you're a graduate program or you're somebody that's trying to kind of pick up these skills. But how I would go about it or structure emphasis would probably vary depending on, again, what I think the function of the graduate program that I'm in is.
Yeah. Awesome. The and just as uh, a fun creative endeavor, what we did with Project Chiron, which is a weekly newsletter, it comes out on Fridays. We tried to challenge ourselves by setting up writing about each one of those topics each week. So it's a rotating 8-week schedule. And then as another fun endeavor, tying in themes from various different, often dystopian kind of sci-fi
Yeah, yeah,
pieces, but we
yeah.
started with Project or Ready Player One, and then we moved
Uh,
into The Matrix. Now we're moving into Minority Report. As
yeah,
just kind of like as a fun, creative way to kind of talk about these things.
yeah.
So
I think
I
what's
want
also
to go ahead.
one quick comment, and then I actually have a question for you. One thing that I've also really enjoyed about that is I know when we set that up, it was just going to be like a fun challenge, like, oh, let's write this from the theme of the Matrix. But what's been cool is that each one of those storylines holds out some specific aspect of the use of technology and how humans interact with it. And so it's been fun to actually see some of those themes inform how we talk about all this stuff with AI. So
Yeah, it worked out
I've learned
perfect. A
something through it.
good example of like I'm like this I think makes sense to do, and then later we're like, hey, this worked out really well.
Yeah, yeah, oh,
Not always
absolutely.
knowing, you know. Cool.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so question for you. So you often emphasize story as data. And so in an age where large language models generate fluent narratives, what makes human narrative still essential for shaping professional culture and behavior analysis?
Yeah, so AI can mimic form but not function. So it reproduces patterns of language, not the lived contingencies that give professional stories their cultural weight. So narratives
Mhm.
and behavior analysis transmit values, warnings, identity, things like this. And those come from direct contact with the client setting and consequences, none of which the AI experiences. And I'll asterisk this with until like maybe we have
Yeah, until they're in
like
robots and
ev- yeah,
sensory systems.
yeah, until
Yeah.
every sensory system in the room with us is like feeding that in. Um, so I don't know. Human storytelling is how communities decide what matters, I think, and that might be a little too pompous sometimes, but I think they really transmit culture. I mean,
Mhm.
you can point back to large things, whether it's works that Skinner have done and the influence they've had on our field, or if you want to really step back and look at things like the Bible and the influences that it's had
Oh
on
yeah.
societies and cultures, right? Um, so these models, they help draft, like we've been talking about, but only practitioners can really embed the meaning that shapes cultures. And so there still
Yeah.
is 100% relevance for humans. Just watch as those sensors start to fill out the room a little
Yeah.
more, right?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Nice. I love that.
cool.
Now, and it makes I like the examples that you had also, and I think the Bible's a great one, right? Set up stories that allow people to remember some of these moral imperatives, perhaps, rather than like an encyclopedic list of just things. Not as easy to remember or pass on to future generations.
Right. Maybe we need a Bible
Yeah,
of AI written by
yeah,
behavior analysts.
that'd be cool. Yeah, there you go.
Are you cool if we shift into, I see if there's anything else that we needed in number 5 here, but we shift into the closing just because we're kind of coming
Oh
down.
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I love it.
So was there anything in I guess
Um,
real quick, was there anything in the, supposing maybe this will maybe lead us in there a little bit. So supposing AI
okay.
becomes embedded in like every clinical workflow from data collection to recommendations, what does
Yeah,
ethical supervision of this system look like
yeah. That's a yeah,
when
beautiful
when
question.
everything's looping back?
Yeah, I think it's um, difficult to answer in part because of like we referenced before, AI is still so new. So I think we're all trying to figure out how do we use these things. So if you look at traditional supervisory relationships, it's like the more knowledgeable, less knowledgeable. Like let me teach you how to do these things. Um, so what we do know though is that it's kind of moved from tools being embedded in that supervisory relationship. So sure, we had our data collection systems before, but really when I'm working with you as a supervisee, I'm trying to teach you how to like look at data, right? Analyze, make all these clinical decisions, so on and so forth. But now it's what's kind of inserted is well, it's not just that, it's also the output of these AI tools. How are you using them? How are you using those to support what you're doing, not doing, so on and so forth? And so I think some of the classic supervision skills remain relevant in terms of like modeling critical thinking, problem solving, decision under uncertainty, data collection to check the appropriateness of your decisions, and so on. But there's also a bunch of new things that are now have to be, I think, formally inserted as topics within that supervisory relationship. So, making sure that the BCBA is ultimately responsible for the clinical decision, and they're not just pressing the easy button all the time. Making sure that we're building some of these AI literacy checklists into that day-to-day ongoing conversation, because it's probably not something that you can have a 1 hour conversation and be fluent on. This is going to be skill sets built up over probably months or years. Um,
So to
Making sure
work
that
on,
oh yeah, go for it.
go ahead.
Oh no, I was just to say
Sorry.
last couple of things, and then also making sure they're monitoring kind of system level effects and shifts in their own and BCBA's patterns of behavior and decision making as a function of kind of reliance on some of these tools. So.
And say to kind of wrap us up, is there anything that worries you most about if the field ignores AI literacy for, I don't know, a few years, another decade?
Yeah,
um,
I mean, I think what we know exists in the tech world is that cost savings is a big deal and people will buy technology that saves them time and money. And so my biggest concern is that more and more tools will come online that promise to do things for behavior analysts that are, good enough to look right. But don't have a lot of the nuance and complexity that we've kind of referenced before. And so we'll slowly be shaped. I like to use the analogy of Idiocracy, the movie, right? We'll slowly be shaped towards some lowest minimum or potential incompetence and reliance. I think that's my biggest concern. But how about you? What are your thoughts?
Real quick, the AI assists, the human is responsible, and the organization reinforces that hierarchy consistently. So it's kind of on
Yeah.
everybody here at the end of the day. Every AI enhanced workflow that needs visible human, they need visible human checkpoints where analysts review, edit, sign off rather than simply checking accept. Just remember that you're going to be responsible for the things that you click accept on. It's not going to be these
Hmm.
tech companies.
Oh yeah.
More broadly that are making these tools. And trust is built only when the workflow is transparent, making it clear what the model does, what the human supervises, and where the risk still sits at the end of the day. So I don't know. I feel like I sway back and forth, but a consistent theme that I get is there's this Buckminster Fuller quote that said, whether it's to be utopia or oblivion, it will be a touch and go relay race right up until the final moment. And that seems to be my
Yeah.
kind of vibes in this space. It's on us
Nice.
to learn, educate ourselves, and build the contingencies within our systems.
Yeah. Love it.
Awesome. Well, I just cannot thank Dr. David Cox and Ryan O'Donnell enough for this talk. You guys definitely went deeper. I just to be totally transparent, I feel like I've listened to a lot of talks on AI and ethical implications in our field, and there was so many interesting conversations that I could listen to this whole thing again. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. Our last keyword is innovation. I did put the link in the form. I'll put it in again because I know it gets buried. I'll hit enter in a few minutes. If you want to if you want to learn more, check out our website. You can book a demo and see how our platform can help you, and you can see some of our AI features as well. You can also connect with us on social media to stay up to date with our latest webinars and free resources. We will be sending out a recording to all registrants that's also going to have some additional resources. So be on the lookout for that later today. And please also don't forget to complete the form in the chat to earn your CEU. And I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you for joining us to learn and grow together. I hope everyone has a great day. I'll put this in the chat again.
Can we answer a question or two real quick? Is
Of
that okay?
course, of
Okay,
course.
sweet. Um, these ethics ones, I'm going to lean on Mr. Ethics in here since you have the formal training on some of these.
Yeah.
I think there was one earlier, which is like if I'm using something like a large language model like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, whatever it is, to review my SOAP notes. How is that going to be unethical if I use that, or how can I also set it up to where I'm ethically getting review
Oh,
and like
sure.
leveraging these tools?
Yeah. So my biggest concern there would be some kind of HIPAA privacy data violation, something like that. So there are ways, right? And people are probably familiar with the idea of redacting documents to remove all personally identifiable information or personal health information. Um, Legally, and I'm not a lawyer, so you should always chat with the lawyer before this. But legally, it seems like you'd be okay from that kind of a violation standpoint if you redact the SOAP notes first and then upload them, right? So no data is being transferred. I think what I'd be more curious or concerned about would be evaluating the response that I would get back at the end of the day. So, going back to like how these models are built and whatnot. If I'm a tech company building these systems, there's usually this incredibly long, arduous process built around what's called prompt engineering, more on like the software developer side, not the kind of chat based side. So a lot of work to go in to make these inputs accurate, reliable, valid, tested, things like that, set up eval frameworks and whatnot. So I think that'd be my other concern is even if I'm over that kind of potential legal hump, the work it takes to validate the accuracy of the output is tremendous. And so, yeah, learn how to set up those kind of prompt engineering eval frameworks, I think would be, if I really wanted to do that, that's probably my response.
I feel like one I feel like a good call to action within organizations would be like learning about some of this nuance and then realizing that like there needs to be a way to insert some technical expertise that's coming into an organization to help kind of like frame and set these
Mhm.
things up correctly, right?
Yeah.
I doubt there's too many organizations that are really like doing a ton of that, and it's also going to take
Oh, for
some
sure.
resource dedication.
Yeah.
Another one.
And I think to plug our own newsletter here, Project Iron, a lot of the stuff that we're doing in that newsletter is providing this kind of information. Here's what that structure would look like. Here's how you can evaluate frameworks. Here's how you can set that up at your organization. So that's part of the mission of that newsletter is to help people learn this stuff.
Yeah, agreed. There's probably 16, 18 back issues now. I think 18, 19
Yeah, something like that.
back issues that you can access. So another one was, if we suspect our BCBA is using AI unethically, what are the steps you
Mhm.
suggest we take to preserve quality of care to our clients?
Oh, sure. I mean, I think I'd approach that just like any other instance where I would suspect the BCBA is doing something unethical, that could potentially harm clients, right? And so the BACB has this nice list of things. You're supposed to first confront the individual, like, "Hey, are you doing this? Like, what's going on here?" See if you can resolve it internally first. From there, if you think that there is some kind of significant risk to harm to the clients and whatnot, I'm guessing the organization has some kind of structure for reporting these kinds of things to handle it from a clinical side. There's also the BACB reporting standards process that you'd go through. All that to, again, highlight, I don't know if there's anything unique about this compared to other instances where you might catch somebody uh, doing something that could harm a client. So I would probably lean into those frameworks that they're probably familiar with already.
That's awesome. There was someone asking about just different resources. I shared the link to the
Oh,
courses and
nice.
stuff in Chiron, but there was I don't know if there's other things you wanted to plug. I wanted to suggest real quick. There's your LinkedIn always has interesting things that are kind of popping up on your feed
Oh,
that
thanks,
are
man.
related to behavior analysis and like AI. And so one of the things that I've found useful is just scrolling through what's David's published on LinkedIn. And usually it's, I don't know, a line or two about the importance of it, and then the actual
Yeah.
source material. So the source material is really fun. There's examples of that, like there was statements made by the American Psychological Association on just the impact that these tools are having, and like
Oh, yeah.
whether or not you can be leaning upon them. So
Yeah.
there's usually good interpretations of other fields and of resources from other fields that I think help inform. I like to see how other professions are approaching things, I guess. And I get a
Yeah.
lot of that out of it.
Oh, nice. Appreciate you saying that. And I'll also say that I actually get some of that content from you. So I would also follow
Yeah.
Ryan's feeds. Yeah.
The other thing is another question here. Do you think that we need to talk to parents and caretakers before using AI to support clients? Yes.
Yeah.
That's a big theme
Yeah.
that we've had. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Ultimately, so this
Yeah.
is one of the things that personally worries me a lot. And I, quite honestly, ebb and flow between like, does our broader culture and society globally even care about this stuff anymore?
Mhm.
Honestly, which is like data privacy. Obviously, it's super important. HIPAA is a good example in our field. And I don't think people maliciously do these sort of things.
Mhm.
But anytime that we're taking information from somebody and putting it in to a model like this, that's taking their private life and putting it into a system that most likely depends on the nuance of how they're designed, but most likely is also using that data to inform and develop the model,
Oh, for
which
sure.
just really scares me at the end of the day. A good
Oh, yeah.
example of this I like to share with folks is uh, uh, people that have previously been in the national security roles in the United States government have been hired onto the private companies of these, and they don't always have the cleanest track record of human rights and privacy being first and foremost. And so
Mhm.
we know that there's at least contingencies arranged for potentially misusing that data. And so just as us being the vector of our clients' information and that private life, I think there's just like a lot of responsibility to think about like anything that you're using, and like to what degree is that data that you're interacting with in those models, is it potentially going to cause issues for that person down the road?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. I don't think I have anything particular to add to that. The only kind of like related thing I'd throw out is I think this also raises a question for each of us in our transparency with other decision tools we make. And I don't know that historically we've had that conversation in the past. But to the extent that I don't know, collaborating with colleagues outside my company around clinical decisions for a case, right? I'm struggling and for whatever reason want to ask this group, are parents okay with me doing that? And things and whatnot. So I think there are a number of tools and technologies we use that directly impact how we deliver care, that we also need to chat about potentially if we should be bringing clients into that conversation. You know, are they okay if we do X, Y, Z? Here's why we're using it. Here's the potential harms, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Um, Another question was about the AI guidelines. That's the AI consortium, right?
Oh, for CAST, is that the one they're referencing?
No, so sorry, I should give more context. Dr. Andrea Murray was talking about AI guidelines several BCBAs were working upon. That's the
Oh,
AI
yeah, yeah.
consortium, most likely, right?
Yeah, yeah. That's my hunch. And there were kind of two groups working on them. One was CAST. Those were published earlier summer, early fall, somewhere in there.
I'll get
Um,
links.
yeah, that'd be great. And then the other one is primarily led by Dr. Adrienne Jennings. And she has a group. I don't believe those have come out yet. I saw a draft a few, I don't know, months
They're
back.
not live on the website right now.
Oh, perfect. There you go.
Not
Oh,
yet.
nice. You found it.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, dope. Yeah,
And then CAST, yeah. Here's the
awesome.
CAST one. Good, solid questions, y'all. Thank you.
Yeah. And you're fast grabbing those links. Well done. Impressive. Yeah.
Lots of scouring the internet in my lifetime.
Yeah, yeah. Love it. Nice. Um, I
Okay.
think, yeah, I think those are the questions.
Yes. Well,
Sweet.
thank you guys so much for staying past the time to answer all of those
Of
questions.
course.
I'm going to go ahead and stop.